Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beacons of Balance. If it's your first time here joining us, welcome. And what Beacons is about, we're in a world of duality of up, down, left, and right. And we're here about bringing this chaotic life that we live in, and this little blue marble back into balance for each and every one of us. It's all about you. So we share different pearls of wisdom, things we think you'd be interested in, and also we bring wonderful speakers on. I'm Arlene. This is my wonderful co-host, Joanne. And we have a wonderful guest speaker that Joanne will be introducing that's with us again today. She was here once before.
Hi, Rosemary. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you.
For all of you who don't know, we've had Rosemary last summer, and it was a very interesting topic. So make sure to check out the August 14th episode. But today, we are going to be talking about what happens to the loved ones, that have lost someone to suicide. Most people don't cover that. It's always about the person that took his life. So, we've got a lot of great things that we can get into today. Rosemary is also the author of Remembering the Light, How Dying Saved My Life. So welcome back, Rose.
Thank you.
We're just honored to have you
welcome back.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So, wow, there's so many things we want to get into. First of all, Rosemary, what was the most eye-opening thing that you learned through going through all of this? Was there?
Oh,
I know there are many. Wow.
yeah, I guess the most eye-opening thing, there were a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the biggest one was realizing that we really are in an unenlightened society as far as dealing with suicide survivors, which is how we're known, people who survive the suicide of a close loved one. And secondly, we become like 21st century lepers. And we are people that everyone else is very afraid of because we've suffered a trauma that is unimaginably hard. And there was a study done by the American Psychological Association. I wish I could quote the year, but it wasn't that long ago, within the last 10 years. And it said to survive the suicide of a close loved one, a significant other, or a child, not your cousin's, uncle's, father's, barber's friend, which I hear those stories a lot too. But to survive the suicide of a close loved one, the psychological trauma and suffering is akin to that of being a concentration camp survivor. In other words, there's not much worse that can happen to you. And that was actually helpful because it meant that the hell I was in was not uncommon. And I don't know if y'all have seen the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. And after he dies, his wife, has lost 2 children, and now she's lost her husband in a car accident. And she ends up taking her own life. And she ends up in what they define, it's a movie, but they define that where she is hell. And the house is upside down. And the house is dark, it's full of water, it's full of bad smells. And, Robin Williams in heaven decides he's going to go find her and save her. And they caution him. They say it's hard to go into hell without becoming enmeshed in it, without losing yourself in the darkness, that it takes a very strong soul to survive that. And he says, well, I have to try. And he says, actually, what he says is, I'd rather be in hell with her than in heaven without her. And that's what I felt like, was I was in hell and nobody wanted to come anywhere near me. And looking back, it takes a very, 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 very strong person to survive going into hell to save somebody else. And one of the women who helped me in the beginning, she was my next door neighbor. And for 3 weeks, she pretty much just sat with me for hours a day. And to her credit, after 3 or 4 weeks, she said, I need you to go somewhere else. She said, I'm kind of tapped out. And it's okay. I bear her no ill will. I bear her nothing but the loveliest of feelings. But she herself had been through multiple traumas. She had a grandchild that was much beloved that died tragically just a year prior. And then she had a niece that had also died tragically while helping her out. So she'd had 2 catastrophic losses in a short period of time. But that's how she was able to reach out and help me, because she had gone to hell and she'd found her way back out. Meanwhile, I have some siblings, and they could not. One of my family members, let's say that, looked at me. I mean, this is day 3. I'm still in shock after my husband's suicide. This happened April 2016. But one of my so-called family members who'd come to the house, so that's a good thing to do. They come to the house for the funeral and everything. But she looked at me and she said, "What is with this carrying on so?" She said, "It was just a husband. You can go out and find another one. Not a big deal." What? And then at the funeral, you have the visitation where everyone comes forward. And my husband was a pretty important person in the local community, had a big job, big important job. So we have big funeral, big turnout. So we're at the visitation, it's closed casket behind me because, and several people come forward and say things like, "I don't know what I'd do if it was my own husband in that casket. You must be very strong to survive this. I'd just lay down and die." And I was so angry by those kind of comments. And then the other thing, because to me it's saying, so you didn't love him quite as much as I love. My love for mine is deeper than your love because look at you. You're greeting people at the visitation, so must be in pretty good shape. And I realized that, and the other thing I heard a lot was, one, don't ever tell somebody who's suffering through hell that they're strong. Never. That just enrages us because what are the options? What can we really do except lay down and die ourselves? And you can try that, but it doesn't work very well. You can try to lay down and die and you're still alive days later. The other comment people made was, they said, "You're so strong." They said, if that was him. Oh, yeah, my favorite. Not really. There must have been signs. Was he depressed? Why did he do this? And it's not to comfort you. I realized I talked with Brian, I can't remember his last name, but he does a podcast called Grief to Growth. Grief #2 Growth is his website. He's a phenomenal man. And he's a young man. And he lost his daughter to a disease that came up out of nowhere and took her life in 3 days. Just, But he and I were talking about this, and what we shared, the epiphany we both had is when people say stupid stuff, and there's a lot of people who say stupid stuff, they're not trying to comfort you, they're trying to comfort themselves. They're trying to say, well, this is not going to happen to me because I would see if my husband had signs. I would see if he was getting depressed. I would know. Or the one about I just lay down and die. They say, well, I love my husband more, and because I love him more, he's going to stay alive. So this will never happen to me. So they're very busy trying to comfort and provide solace to themselves, usually at the griever's expense. So when I see somebody, and I have reached out to more than a few people who lose somebody to suicide, and I usually say something. I say, I can't say that I have pat phrases, and something that I realize is if everyone who's been through a suicide like I have, if they could just ask God, show me who needs help. Let me, something I put on a piece of paper early on was help me heal so I can help others heal. That was very important to me. And that was kind of the first little beam of light that shone into the pit of hell that enabled me to find my start walking back toward peace, start walking back to a place of healing. And that helped me heal so I can help others heal. The friend who shared that with me, and I don't know if it's original to her, but she was a teenager, an adolescent, when her beloved sister in the next room ended her life. So my friend was the first one to find her, and my friend spent a few years watching mom and dad go bye-bye, by like emotionally, mentally. And she realized that was her point of remaining on this earth, was help me heal so I can help others heal. And I wrote that on a piece of paper and I plastered it all over the walls of my house. And that helped me a lot. But I think our mission is on this earth, people who've gone through this deep trauma, people, I often get emails from people who say, "I'm so sorry you've been through so much." And I don't really feel that way. I mean, I don't feel self-pity. I feel like it's the road I'm on, and it's the road I'm supposed to be on. And now this thing is helping others, I hope and pray. But one of the things that has happened more than once in my life, I mean, this happened, he killed himself 8 years ago plus. One of the things that happens not infrequently, but it happened Christmas a few years ago, after my own near-death experience in September 2019, my dear friend asked me to come visit him. He lived about 1,000 miles away, so I got on a plane and I flew out to visit him for Christmas. And he was alone at Christmas, and I was alone at Christmas, so I thought I'll go spend some time with him. It was one of those things just felt like the right thing to do. And he says, listen, for Christmas dinner, we're going to my friend's house. She has a few friends over and she wants to meet you. And I was like, well, okay. I was kind of thinking just the two of us, but that's fine. So we go over to her house and she's the consummate hostess and everything is arranged and, a dinner table's perfectly set. Emily, oh gosh, who's the etiquette one? Emily Post would be very proud. But everything was flawless and little, the multiple glasses and the multiple forks and the plates and everything was just perfect, absolutely perfect. Martha Stewart, I guess, is the modern one. And so she prepares this elegant meal, and there's 7 of us seated around the table. And everything was perfect. All the food was perfect. And we all had a good time, and we were laughing and sharing stories. Well, after the meal, I see my hostess, this perfect hostess, is standing in the kitchen. And because of my place where I was seated, I could see her standing in the kitchen, leaning against the kitchen sink and sobbing. Yeah. I was like, oh man, there's a bad memory happening to her. And after she has so graciously opened her home to me and all these guests and even had gifts for us. I mean, I hadn't even thought to bring a gift. It's Christmas Day. I walk in the kitchen, and as I walk in the kitchen, I just pray, God, I don't know what I'm to say or do, but please help me. Help me be a helper. Help me know what to say. May the Holy Spirit give me wisdom to say exactly the thing that helps her. So she's sobbing a lot. And you can tell the other people around the table are, seeing this and nobody knows what to do. Anyway, I walk over to the kitchen sink and I gently put my hand on her right shoulder and I kind of lean in and I say, what's going on? Are you doing okay? What's happening? And she said, you would never understand. And I said, well, you might be right, but tell me what's going on and maybe I can help a little tiny bit. You've been so kind to me this whole evening. What can I do? And she said, well, my husband and I had an argument, and then he walked out to the porch and he took a gun, put it in his mouth, and killed himself. And I kind of snickered, which kind of broke the spell. And she looked at me like, what is wrong with you? And I said, oh, my dear friend. I said, I understand better than anybody might think. I said, my husband and I had an argument, and then he did exactly the same thing as your husband. And I said, these men, they are just bastards, aren't they? And she stopped crying. And she said, yeah, they are. And I said, it nearly killed me. And she said, yeah, it still gets me every holiday. And I said, well, you know what? We're going to survive. We're not going to let them drag us by the ankles back to the depths of darkest hell. I said, you have given us such a lovely meal and a lovely evening. I didn't have anywhere to go for Christmas. And now I have this lovely memory with you and your people and my friend. And I said, so we're going to be okay. Well, after that, we talked about many things. She shared the secrets of her heart and she was laughing. She went from, the sobbing, which is so hard to even think about, to laughing. And, we talked about how these men were horrible to do this thing. And they are. It's horrible to do this to your wife or to anybody you care about. And to do it, yeah, you get the picture. So we spent several hours together. We were there until, I think, almost midnight. And it changed the whole atmosphere. And she went to a place of peace pretty quickly. And so, the point of this podcast and my sharing is what can we do for others? And in my case, I hope my book helps others. But I think the way that all of us who've been through something like this can be the biggest help is just to literally get on our knees and ask God, put me in a place where I can help. Put me in, coach. Put me in a place where I can help other people. And then the PS to this, it's not even a PS, the part 2 to this. So I was in Boston visiting one of my children when I found out that my husband had ended his life at our home. Neighbor called. And so I got on a plane. I almost fainted when that call came. And my neighbor who found him, and this is an interesting little side note, the neighbor was very, very wrong to call me and say, here's what happened. He should have dispatched state police, emergency personnel, somebody to be present with me. So that's a side note. Don't ever just call somebody because they might be alone, and who knows? It's just a bad idea. That's why, like when the military informs a family of a death, they always send 2 people in. You never call. You never ever call. And maybe in wartime you have to. So, because what happened after that call came, I had just gotten to Boston. I was standing outside of the car, answered the phone. Hello, hey.
Oh, froze.
Yeah. So I went down pretty quick. And I caught myself going down fainting. And I said, no, you can't faint. You got to put this off for a while. So anyway, I got on the plane. I went right back to the airport, found a flight. I could only find a flight partway home. And I got to Baltimore, trying to head home to the East Coast. I still had a few hours to go. And in Baltimore, they couldn't find a plane to get me all the way back home. And I thought about something that, there's an expression, love takes us all the way, that God is not going to say, you're only halfway there and I'm out. So that comforted me. So I got on a plane. And by the way, to the credit, I hope this is okay to say, but to the credit of Southwest, they held the plane while I ran down the tarmac.
Wow.
Yeah, not the tarmac, ran down the corridors of the airport and down the jetway. And the plane had been overbooked by 2 people, but 3 people didn't show up. So they had 1 seat left on a booked flight. And I know that was just a miracle, literally. So they have 1 seat, and I sit down, and this was in my book. I don't know if y'all read the book, but this story was in my book. But I sit down on the 1 seat left in the plane, and the poor man had a window seat. And I said, dear sir, I'm so sorry, but I've just had a tragedy, and I'm already about to throw up. Could I sit near the window? It'll help with the air sickness. And God bless him, he did.
Oh, good.
So he sits next to me and he says, you look pretty composed. Are you okay? And I said, no, it's an act. I'm not okay. And he said, what happened? And I told him. I said, I'm trying to get home and deal with the stuff that has to be dealt with. And he looked straight ahead for a minute and he said, I want you to remember for the rest of your life that this was a divine seating assignment, because my mother did the same thing to me. She argued with me. She started a fight. She hung up and she put a gun in her mouth.
Oh my God.
And he said, so you remember, the angels are watching out for you. He said, look at this full flight. And he said, and where do you end up? Next to me.
Wow.
And he told me, and he was a remarkable man. He told me, he said, believe it or not, there's going to be a day where you realize you went a minute without thinking about this. And then there's going to be a day where you go 5 minutes without thinking about it. And one day you'll forgive yourself, because they start arguments to get themselves emotionally charged up to do this horrible thing. This has nothing to do with you said, he said, she said. It's just a way of putting a little disconnect there. And he said, so one day you'll forgive yourself, and one day you'll forgive him. And one day you'll realize that life goes on. And he said, it's going to take some time, and you're going to be different the rest of your days. That person you were before this happened is gone. And he talked to me it was a short flight. It was about a 45-minute flight, but he talked to me for the duration of the flight. And then he said something so kind. He said, I know you're in tremendous turmoil right now, but I must tell you, you look incredibly calm. Mm-hmm. And he said, whatever that source is that gives you this calmness in the midst of this horror, he said, you're going to have to lean on that for a while to get through this. And he said, you're also going to be tempted to end your own life. And he said, but don't, because you need to get through this, and don't let them control you that much. Right. And I thought, wow, that's really good. And I remember it. I was in shock.
That's powerful.
But I remember that conversation.
Wow, yeah. That was a blessing. That was a miracle and a blessing.
What a miracle.
It was.
I'm getting chills with this. I think it was the angelic intervention.
Yeah,
It
God
was. It very much
people
was.
came through that. Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to add, going back to when I said felt like a 21st century leper, I get so many emails from people who say that is it. We get ostracized. We get put off to the side. We get marginalized. But according again to the American, I don't know if it's who came up with this stat, but people who have survived the suicide of a close loved one, again, significant other or a child or somebody very dear to you, are, let me get this right, 14 times more likely to end their own life. So here we talk, suicide prevention sets my hair on fire, the talk about it. So here we have identified a very high-risk group. Somebody who's lost someone to suicide is now 14 times more likely. And what do? We ostracize them. We say, and what I heard about my husband was, well, I got blamed. I just got roundly blamed by so many people, even my own family members. It's like, one, I wasn't even in town. Two, I prayed for the man twice a day, every day of my life. I tried to surround him in love and light. I mean, it's not my fault. And to put a fine point, not too fine a point on it, and this is true for everybody who loses somebody to suicide, across the board true. I was not important enough to make him do this or to stop him from doing this. Either way, my opinion of him just wasn't that important. And here I am, because the day before he did this, he said, I'll be dead soon and you'll have to find your own way in this world. And I grabbed him by the lapels and I said, take it back. We do not say, the words have power. Don't say things like that. We're in a universe that if we say I'm going in this direction, the universe says, oh, okay, well, here's what we'll do. Take it back. Take it back. Take it back right now. You are the image and likeness of God. You have an eternal life, and your time on here is not up. I need you. I love you. So to get roundly blamed for it, and we do, was brutal. So, but yeah, we've identified a risk group. Lose somebody to suicide, and you're 14 times. Actually, I think it's more. It's 14 times and up, depending on whose stats you believe. So we take these people who are at risk and we screw them up even more. You don't heal in isolation. I actually met a guy, wonderful man, and his trauma was a war-related trauma. He was a young guy. I think he'd been in Afghanistan. He'd been through multiple horrors in Afghanistan. And he was diagnosed as having severe PTSD. He'd have the nightmares. His wife would try to wake him up in the middle of the night. He'd turn around and slap her and thrash her and choke her and all that stuff. So he was really struggling. So he said, well, I'm going to fix this. And he went off to an isolated cabin in the woods and said, I'm going to work on myself. I'm just going to have peace. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to work on it. Well, the wife had to go get him. And I think it was in like 3 or 4 weeks. And what she found is he had gone downhill so fast, she barely recognized him. And she said, what we're going to do is we're going to put you in a psych ward because you have gone downhill so fast. And the psychiatrist told him, people say they're going to get away and heal themselves. Invariably, they get multiple times worse. You don't heal in isolation. You heal by people surrounding you. And I remember, because I had a caretaker, I still couldn't live by myself. I didn't live by myself for 2 years. I just couldn't. I had the terrors, I had the nightmares, all of it. But when people would come and visit me and drop in and visit me, I would feel better. It's like their light, their love, their energy was kind of perking me up like a wilting flower, putting a little fresh spring water on it. And I realized being around people was very therapeutic for me. And the other thing, I had a lot of mental health care. Another problem we have in this country, somebody kills themselves and we don't really have easy access to mental health care in the United States, which is unfortunate. And you might not have any if you don't have good insurance, which is a mess. So people do not heal in isolation. We need to be surrounded by others. And pardon me, I know so many young people after they lose somebody to suicide, they move back in with mom or dad or or a friend. Pardon me. And that's good. That's good. I met another guy. He was also a veteran of the Mideast conflict. And he asked me to come visit him. So I went out to his house and we talked a lot about his house because I have a background in architecture. And his name was, name doesn't matter. But I was talking with him and I said, how are you doing? He said, I'm not doing good. He said, I think about killing myself a lot. I said, well, what are you going to do about that? Because that's a bad thing to do. I don't want you doing that. make me very sad. And he said, oh, I know. He said, I'm going to sell this house and move back in with my mom and dad. And I'm just going to live with them for a while because when I'm around them, I feel better. And I said, I am so proud of you. That is so smart. And I'm so glad to hear that. I said, this house you bought needs a lot of work. And this is very isolating where you live out here. So please do. I know your mom and dad must be so happy that you're coming back to them. And he said, oh, they are. He said, I can help dad around the house and I can just make mom laugh. And so if I was queen of the world or just, queen of the United States, that would be okay. I would make multi-generational housing the norm instead of saying, when are you going to move out of your mom's basement? Seriously, basement dweller. We chastise people for that. I would, and somebody told me, I can't remember where, maybe it's the Netherlands, I think, one of those progressive countries, far away. But they take old people and they put them in homes with a family. And then the family can go off and leave the kids with the older person. And by old people, I don't mean somebody infirm. I mean somebody like me, somebody in their 60s or 70s, somebody who's still in pretty good health. And that way the old person gets regular food. They have somebody making sure they don't fall down some steps. And it's a built-in babysitter who's around young children and the beautiful energy of young people.
What you're talking about, Rosemary, that's how life used to be eons ago.
It is.
Remember that saying, it takes a village. Yeah. And it is, what you said is so important. It's the nurturing people do. I mean, I believe we wouldn't be here on this little blue marble if we were supposed to be here isolated by ourselves.
Right.
They know the children that are like in Romania that have been, they're just discarded and they're put in these orphanages where they're not touched. And they know this from even babies coming in. If they're isolated and they're not touched, they don't thrive.
Right? Yeah, they'll die. Years and years ago, I remember reading this. They discovered if a baby has absolutely no human contact, it can have all of its physical needs met, but if it doesn't have human contact, it literally dies.
Right.
And I wish we recognized that in old people too.
When I was growing up, when I was little, I mean, it was unheard of to put grandparents in a nursing home. There were no nursing homes. You brought that grandparent into your house, and my grandfather was there. He died in our house, but we took care of him. I mean, and the love and the wisdom we got from that man, it's a different world today. Totally different world.
It is. I wish I could figure out how we can solve this, because one of the reason the Villages is thriving, we were talking about that before we started the podcast. It's the largest retirement community in America. It might be the world. The reason it thrives is because the houses are about this far apart and they have a sense of community. And these folks who are in there, I mean, it's a 55 plus community, but from my experience, I'd say the overwhelming majority are 70 plus and beyond. But the reason it's thriving is because they do have a sense of community. I have seen, they have all these community centers. It's 117 villages, hence the name, and they all have pools and community centers and rec centers. Can't tell you how many times I've gone to a rec center, which is where they have the pools and the clubhouses and the meeting rooms. And there's invariably a handful of people just sitting on the front porch in a rocking chair, enjoying the beautiful Florida weather, but realizing they don't want to be home alone in their little house. They want to see people coming and going. They want to hear people laughing. They don't want to be stuck by themselves. So I think the reason the Villages is growing, by the way, they are building 400 houses a month.
A month?
And they can't, a month. And they can't quite keep up with the demand, which is staggering. And the houses, they get all these houses coming on the market because, why do you leave the Villages? Most people leave because they pass on. It's a fact. And so they've got all those coming on the market and they're still selling and they are still building. And this is, this fact was from fall of 23 when I was down there for an extended stay. But yeah, they were building 400 a month and couldn't keep up. And it's a community unto itself. I mean, they have their own banks, they have their own radio station, their own newspaper, their own everything. But the reason I believe it's thriving is because the old folks understand they need each other. If they don't have family, they need each other. And as we were discussing before, I've learned in my experience, I want to be around young people. So I haven't figured it out yet. Something that I've been thinking about, I live in a beautiful house in a beautiful place in the Midwest, and I have a spare bedroom, and I'm not too far from a local college. And I've decided to seek out some college student from that local college who may want housing that isn't a dorm to come live in this spare room, which has its own private bath. And I thought, what a lovely thing that would be. One, to share my home, and two, to share it at a very affordable price, and three, hope they can cook and make it an even more affordable price. But yeah, that is the way we used to be. And, who knows again, back to the topic, how many suicides could be avoided if we had a better sense of community? I wonder, and I don't know the stats, but how often is financial pressure responsible for suicide?
Well, plays a big part.
Yeah. There's a variety of things. Can I ask you, because we're going to be wrapping up soon here. Time goes by very quickly with you. What was your blessing? What were one of your blessings out of everything that you just talked about, what you went through?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. One of my blessings, because I always make a note of the blessings of hard experiences because it kind of helps redirect. The blessing was I have yet to encounter a person who's been through trauma that I can't put my arm around their shoulder and say, tell me what's going on. Nothing shocks me. Nothing unnerves me, because they say their story and then I say, I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I've been through something pretty hard too.
Yeah.
And I know how it feels. And so, I'm not in this world as a therapist. I have no professional training, but I think so much of this life is just touching one person, like that guy on the Southwest flight who reached out to me, or the woman I met for Christmas to whom I reached out. My gosh, there was a program in the 50s, a television program, and it talked about we can't change the world, but we can be a point of light. And I love this expression. It's a little corny, but I love it. It doesn't cost a candle anything to light somebody else's candle.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's true. It's seeing the light in each one of us because that's what we have. And I think, what you had touched on and talked about, and I know, you said some people say stupid things. I think sometimes they do, but sometimes they just don't know what to do. And I think they just don't know how to handle it. And it's overwhelming. And it may not be that they don't care or have the compassion, but, a lot of people don't know people don't know what feelings are about. People don't know how to get in touch with feelings and that. And it's true, the statements that you're making, unless you've walked into that statement is, unless you've walked into my shoes, you don't know what it is. It used to, this is kind of off track a little bit, but years ago, of course, when I had my children, there really weren't female OBGYNs, really. They were mostly, the majority were males. And, here I am in my 20s, they'd say, well, this is the way you're going to feel, and this is what you're going through. And I remember lying there on the table. Of course, I wouldn't talk back at that age. You just respect it. It was a doctor. But in my mind, I'm going, you idiot. Did you ever have a kid in your belly? Did you ever go through this? And is everyone the same? No. So how the hell do you know? You only know by textbook,
Right.
So
you've got to be more just empathic, more compassionate, more patient, and not to judge. That's such a drives me.
It is. And the other really huge blessing, and that not judge made me think of this, the huge blessing. I got to say, before this experience, I'd see somebody homeless or somebody acting crazy or, behaving badly or even cutting you off in traffic. And I think, what is wrong with you? Can't you be better than this? Why are you behaving like this? And now when I see somebody home, I actually did this thing for a while that I'd walk up to homeless people and, give them $10, but mainly I'd sit down with them and I'd say, hey, how'd you end up out here? What's going on? And oh my gosh, I must have encountered 10 different people who said, well, my best friend, my brother, my mother killed themselves and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So now when I see somebody cutting me off in traffic, or I see somebody out with a sign begging for food or money, or any of the horrible circumstances humans can find themselves in, I stop and I think, they might have been through a tragedy and their knees buckled. They couldn't survive it. They didn't have the wherewithal, or they didn't have people who said, come stay in my house, I'll take care of you. I mean, were it not for the many loving people that rushed into the fray to save me, and they came one at a time, which is interesting. I stayed with my neighbor for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I stayed with a friend who lived on a peanut field for 4+ months. And she took care of me. She fed me and took care of me. And then somebody moved in my home. I rented a house, and somebody moved in my home, described in the book as Effie, to take care of me for 2 years. So what about the people who don't have that person in their life? If it weren't for them, I would be dead. I mean, not maybe, but absolutely, because I was moving. My friend Tracy found out I was living out of my car. And I mean, I'd only done it a couple of days. And she said, okay, that's stopping. We're stopping that right now. She said, you're coming home with me. I said, no, I'm not. She said, yes, you are. And I'm going to win this argument so we can talk about it for a half hour, but you're coming home with me. I was like, okay. And I lived with her for 4 months. So now when I see people in dire circumstances, I think they probably didn't have a Tracy, They didn't have somebody. And so these people who are so jacked up and so messed up in the head, I think, they probably went through this and didn't have somebody reaching out and saying, I'm not going to let you drown in these dark waters. I'm going to get you into this rowboat, and it may take a year, but I'll get you back to the shore, and you're going to start living again. And that's what we're supposed to do for each other.
Well,
that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, what you're talking about, one word is really compassion.
Compassion.
It's compassion, it's feeling, it's nurturing, it's taking in.
Right.
And to be aware of where you're going to be, because I know you talked about going into families. Well, I think with that point also is to be with a healthy family, because you don't want to go into where there's an abusive family either.
Yeah, that's true too. And
be abused, So
yeah, the word compassion, I love this. The word compassion, the etymology is literally to suffer with. Like we talk about the passion of the Christ, it's the suffering of the Christ, and calm means with. So when we have compassion, we suffer with them. And one of the most emotionally mature things anybody ever did for me was they literally sat on a couch with me and cried with me.
Wow.
They just held me. I cried, they cried. And, the shortest Bible verse is Jesus wept. Jesus had a broad range of emotion. So if you can't think of anything else to do, one, I always say, show up and shut up. Secondly, it's okay to cry with them, because that means that you feel it. You're feeling how much they are suffering. And then the other thing I always say is, don't ask them for any decisions. Don't say, what day can I come by and bring you dinner? You say, I'd like to bring you dinner next week. I'll just text you it's on the way, and I'll leave it on your front porch. Is that okay? Because they don't want to interact. They usually just want to not have to think about, I'm going to have to get dressed. I'm going to have to meet them at the door. I'm going to have to decide what day. But yeah, I had a woman do that for me. I mentioned that in my book. I moved into this new neighborhood with my caregiver, just a really very dear friend. But I moved into this new neighborhood, didn't know anybody. And this young woman comes across the street, and she says, I see you just moved in. I brought you some Rice Krispie treats. I was like, that's a win. I love Rice Krispie treats. Who doesn't? But she said, how'd you come to move here or something? And I was still very raw. I mean, I was about 4 or 5 months out from my husband's death. And I said, my husband killed himself. I'm not doing well. I can't eat. I'm a mess. And she burst out into tears. I'm like, Rosemary, you are so stupid. Why did you burst out with that? Oh, he killed himself. Why did you do that to this beautiful soul, bringing you Rice Krispie treats and trying to engage you as a neighbor? And what I've since come to learn, anytime I tell somebody my husband ended his own life and they burst into tears, invariably it means they've lost someone too. Right. And she said, my brother did that. My mother never recovered. My father's a mess, and the family will never be the same again. And that actually, she was the one who said, you look pretty gaunt. Are you eating? And I said, no, I'm living off those protein drinks. I can't swallow food. And she said, well, I make too much dinner every night. So every night I'm going to bring you over a tray of food, and I'll bring one for your friend since he's taking care of you. And every night that woman knocked on the door with a tray, 2 trays of food, beautiful dinners, by the way, beautiful, healthy dinners. And she just would knock on the door, hand them off, and leave. And I offered her money, and she said no. And I ended up buying her gift certificates to the store, because I'm like, I can't have this woman spending money on me like this. But she did that for a month.
Wow.
And that's when I started to gain weight back. I had lost 40 pounds.
That's
so that kind of, isn't that phenomenal? A total stranger feeding me every night for weeks.
That's what we need more of.
You definitely had angels around you, and you definitely had people, because everything you're saying is, I mean, everybody was there for you, championing around you,
Right.
and showing you that compassion. Joanne, anything you want to?
The one thing I learned from loss survivors, and I'd like your opinion on this, Rosemary. They said, this was a loss survivor. She lost her son to suicide. She said, the worst thing you could tell us at a funeral is, I am so sorry. Just say, how can I help you? What can I do? But you're only adding more sorrow to the situation by saying, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, show up and shut up. The one I heard was, I heard this a lot. He's in a better place. Well, no, because we're married and I miss him. I want him with me. He's not in a better place. The other one, everything happens for a reason. No, it does not. There was an incident in my neighbor, 2 miles away from me. A little toddler wandered out in the road, got hit by a car, killed instantly. 3 years old.
Oh,
really? Does that happen for a reason? I don't think so. Does my husband doing this happen for a reason? No. I do believe that God helps us survive it, but I don't think God says, hey, let's throw down a toddler. Get some spiritual growth on board for these folks. No. I deeply talk about victim blaming. I deeply resent that kind of reasoning that everything happens for a reason. No, sometimes stuff just happens. And then the other one, this whole manifest your destiny stuff. Yeah, I believe words have power. I believe we need to be careful with the words we put over ourselves and our family. I think we need to be really careful with that. But I also think sometimes in life stuff just happens. I had written mission statements and goals and on and on. I am such a note taker in life. I had a 6-month plan, a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan. Nowhere in that, anywhere did I say, and my beloved husband takes his own life. Nowhere. So stop with the victim blaming that it's part of this law of attraction stuff. Sometimes stuff just happens to people. And to go up to somebody grieving the loss of their beloved and say, you may not see the blessing yet, but everything happens for a reason. And Rabbi Kushner, who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People, he says that, his book and the ensuing books and everything else has made him a very, very famous and somewhat wealthy man. And now he's a big star in the community, in both the Christian and the Jewish community, because of his story and what a blessing it was for people. And he says he would give up every bit of it to have his son Aaron back. Every single piece of it. It is so hollow compared to losing somebody that you cherish. So this everything happens for a reason is so unkind. I don't know if people can understand how bad it hurts to say that. I finally did tell somebody when they said, well, your husband's death, everything happens for a reason. And I said to him, you know what? Your eldest son is so precious to you. You get back to me if something happens to him. You tell me about that then. Which is probably a terrible thing to say, but that's the other thing. When somebody's in the depths of sorrow and shock, they're not always especially kind. Mm-hmm. There's an old hymn, Speak Kindly. Let no harsh word mar the good we may do here. Speak kindly to the erring ones. Perhaps they toil in vain. Perhaps unkindness made them so. Oh, win them back again. So that's what I try to think about. When somebody is really messed up, they're probably really hurt. And we're just supposed to speak kindly.
There's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of anger going on right now. And
well, thank you again, Rose. You've helped so many people. I can't even imagine all the emails that you sat down and patiently answered in the middle of the night. And you're helping more people than you realize. So
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for just being the beautiful light.
Thank you very much.
And obviously you've found balance in your life now.
Yeah.
You've balanced it out.
That's true.
You're at a place of we go back and forth, but you're doing it. So that's wonderful. Yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for watching, listening. Please remember to subscribe below. Victor added a beautiful button for us, and to leave comments. And we'll have all of Rosemary's information again down below. So if you want to reach out and contact her and get her book, and so forth, please do that and continue. We're here every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern.
Right. And share this because we all know people who've gone through the same thing. So
Yep.
share, just keep sharing.
These are archived. You could come back and watch again and again.
Right.
So thanks a lot, Rosemary. Have a wonderful, blessed day. We love you.
Thank you.
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye, Joanne.
Bye-bye.